Hey guys, how's it going? Kripparrian here. It is time for a second part review of the Mean Streets of Gadgetzan cards that have been announced, and some pretty exciting ones. This week we had mainly a feature on the Grime Street Gang, and I did review a few of the cards kind of in the hold mechanic video that I made a few days ago. This is the second card review. The first one was basically the introduction of the expansion that I covered while I was at BlizzCon, but things are spicing up and getting a bit more exciting. These cards I'm about to show you guys are in the order that they were announced. Maybe there's some strategic part to that, but probably not. Kick it off, we got Auction Master Beardo, 3 mana, 3/4. After you cast a spell, refresh your hero power. So overall, just a solid card. Really, that's about it. That basically means it's unlikely to see much play in Constructed, while for the moment being, until the next expansion is launched, probably 2017, I imagine. Until that is released, we will still have this card alongside with the TGT set in the standard format, which means if this card is ever going to be good, it's going to be right now. And I still don't think it's good enough for that. So it's probably just a good arena card, a good but not overpowered enough standard card. But sure, cool card, I guess. Then we have Grook Fu Master. So kind of one of those absolute trash tier cards that you have to expect in any large expansion. Well, Grook Fu Master is among the worst of them. It definitely has better stats than the existing neutral common Wind Fury minions in the game, but that says absolutely nothing. And we have Shaku the Collector. It's 3 mana, 2/3 stealth. Whenever this attacks, add a random card to your hand from your opponent's class. So it's kind of got that steal mechanic. It's a stealth guy, so its chance to stay alive is reasonable. Though I think we'll see a lot of Priest coming up, and with that is going to be a lot of board clears. They're going to kill this guy out of stealth. So I really think it's going to be not so good of a card. People have compared it, rightfully so, to the Undercity Huckster. And I think if Shaku actually cost 2 mana, it'd be about as good as that. But it costs 3 mana, so it's just considerably worse. The idea is if you can somehow buff this guy while he's in your hand, so he can resist and likely get 2 attacks instead of likely get 1 attack, then it's a different story. But I think the hold mechanic is mostly in regard to the Grime Street Gang, which does not include the Rogue class. So even though we have yet to see a lot of the Rogue cards, I am still skeptical that this will work out even then. And we have Trog Beast Rager, 2 mana, 3/2, Battlecry, give a random beast in your hand +1/+1. The 2-drop slot is not particularly competitive in the mid-range / let's just say fast hunter deck in Constructed. But who knows? There's, as we'll see here shortly, there's a lot of cards that synergize with this type of hold mechanic, and if you can narrow it down to specifically a beast, there's some advantages there, so I don't know. I don't think it'll see much play at all, really, but I wouldn't be too surprised if it made a deck or two. Pretty damn good card in Arena, I guess. 2 mana, 3/2 is solid, and you're likely to get a few beasts when you play this, and as a hunter at least. And we have Stolen Goods, 2 mana spell, gives a random taunt minion in your hand +3/+3. Generally a bad card because there's not too many small taunt minions that you'd play, and if you make big minions even bigger and invest 2 cards in them, it doesn't really work out too well as there's a lot of big minion removal. So I don't think it'll see very much play at all. Some people compare this to how druids sometimes use mana acceleration to get giant taunt minions out a little bit earlier and put that block in the game, whereas you can play warrior, use this on 2, and then play like a 3 mana taunt that gets buffed by this, and that is kind of like using a mana accelerant to just get a giant taunt minion. That's 2 cards, you get it out in the early game, and this is kind of 2 cards to get on the early game. So with some comparisons, it seems okay, so with that in mind, there's some potential, but I would say the potential is still quite low. And we have Grime Street Outfitter, 2 mana, 1/1, Battlecry, give all minions in your hand +1/+1. Now on turn 2 to just play a 1/1, which is basically the equivalent of playing nothing, because that's what you would do as a paladin if you had nothing. You'd use your hero power. You guys know how punishing that can be, so it's pretty difficult to actually play this guy on curve, and I think that sets him back quite a bit, despite overall being a very good card. My thinking is that, yeah, it might buff the crap out of a ton of cards in your hand, especially in the early game, and that can be really good leading into the mid game. But if you have no board control leading into the mid game, those minions being a little bit bigger is probably not going to make that much of a difference. So it's a tough call. We definitely have to see this deck in action. All the cards synergize with one another when they buff each other in this manner. So there's definitely some potential there, and it could be a lot of potential to realize. But as a standalone card, it's very, very weak, which I think is going to make it overall a bit weak in Arena. And I think it might be a bit tricky to play. Again, I think it's a good card, but it's such a tough play on turn 2. So we'll see. Then we have Armorsmith. So 5 mana, 2/7 taunt. Whenever this minion deals damage, gain that much armor. So if Priest did not exist, this card would be pretty damn nuts. It would have the taunt wall aspect. So if you were just talking about minion combat, at the very least, it's preventing 7 damage plus the 2 armor that you'd get, plus it deals damage. So, in the very worst case, when it comes to minion combat, it is superb. It is an amazing card. Now, the considerations are, it's a pretty big minion, and, if the class you're against has some kind of removal, they'll probably use it for something like this. And there isn't too many that a lot of the minion combat-based classes have to deal with a card this big, but Priest has some serious answers against 2-attack minions. So this card is literally going to be as good as Priests will allow it to be. So in a vacuum, this card is ridiculous. In Arena, though, a little bit less, because armor doesn't matter almost at all in Arena. It's all about tempo. But in Constructed, if Priest sucks, this card is nuts. If Priest is good, this card is worth nothing. So with a crazy range like that, again, it's almost impossible to predict. And much like a lot of the other cards I've already mentioned, that's a really good thing. That means there's a lot of exploration left to see in the set, and a lot of things to try to see if they actually work. Having no idea whether a card is good is bad for a review video like this, but overall it's fantastic for the state of the game. So I guess we'll see. Then we have Grime Street Smuggler, pretty standard card. It's a 3-class card, so you can play. It's not a neutral card. You can play this in Paladin, Warrior, or Hunter. 3 mana, 2/4. Fair stats. Bad for Constructed. Fair for Arena. Fair plus for Arena. I think it's just good for Arena. A 2/4 stat line will almost always kill the 2-drop played before and stay alive, and that's kind of what you want out of your 3 drops. Battlecry, give a random minion in your hand +1/+1. So, yeah. Tough call in Constructed. The deck that buffs each other constantly would have to be amazingly powerful for this card to actually work out. But that's possible, so we'll see. And we have Grime Street Enforcer. I think this is one of the best cards. That is one of these like buff the other guys in your hand hold mechanic cards, because it's repetitive, because it's on turn 5. By that time, if you're playing that type of deck, this guy's probably been receiving some of these buffs. So he's probably going to be a 5/5. He might even be a 6/6. So at this stage in the game, you're no longer, losing those stats. You get the immediate effect because it's at the end of turn, and you get the repetitive effect, so he's a giant threat. All the good effect end of turn ability cards have seen some play in some aspect of the game, and I believe this will not be an exception. I think this will see some play in some shape. And we have Grime Street Pawn Broker, 3 mana, 3/3. Battlecry, gives a weapon in your hand +1/+1. So this can be very powerful in Arena. The average number of weapons you get is reasonably high. So the issue with that is a lot of them are through minions. So a little bit shaky. It's probably going to be a much better constructed card because you can play like double Gorehowl, and that'll just make Gorehowl able to hit face and only lose durability and not damage, and you might be able to do that twice. Just, there's a lot of options available from a card like this. So much so that it seems like, from what we've seen so far, as a disclaimer, probably weapon removal will continue to be very popular in the next standard cycle, making this card a bit of a hit and miss, but probably good enough to play. And Shaky Zip Gunner, so 3 mana, 3/3 Hunter card, no tribal tag, sadly. If it had a tribal tag, I think it'd be outstanding, but it's still pretty good. Death Rattle, give a random minion in your hand +2/+2. So overall, it's like playing a 5/5 on 3, but the effect is delayed, so it's not really that at all because tempo is so important. I think it's pretty close to 3 mana, 3/3, and then +1/+1, kind of. So it's like a good 3-drop, and it would have extreme synergy if it lands on very specific cards, and you're generally looking for cards that have attack-based abilities or are just really small. You definitely don't want to stack up your big minions even higher because, again, likely Priest meta, big minions that you make even bigger, kind of a waste to get removed anyway. So yeah, it's a bit of a tricky one, but it does seem powerful enough, and it does seem like this card will make a pretty damn big impact in Arena, though Hunter has to come a really long way, and from what I've seen so far on the expansion, that way has not come far enough. Then we have some neutral card that's basically worthless. Sure. It's alright in Arena. If you're winning and you play this, it challenges like every 5-drop, which not every 4-drop does these days, so sure. And we have Hired Gun, 3 mana, 4/3 Taunt. Again, more of these just popping out cards that are on the new average power level that will still not really see any constructed play, but pretty good in Arena. Whatever, not really much to talk about. We have Blowgill Sniper, 2 mana, 2/1 Murloc, Battlecry, deal 1 damage. So this is a pretty interesting card. The stats are pretty fair. They're not like overpowered or anything, but they're like solid. Because it's 2 attack and not 2 defense. It makes it so it challenges a lot of 2-drops. It makes it so with the hero power, it can probably challenge a lot of 3-drops. The flexibility of dealing additional damage is very good. So overall, it's like a pretty good card. Pretty good card by themselves. Does not make constructed lists, but who knows? If you have a little bit of Murloc synergy, I think it might just push it into that range of playable and constructed, and I think this is going to be a pretty game-changing card in Arena. A lot of Arena games, particularly regarding classes that don't have 1-damage hero powers, they're kind of stuck in situations where they're up against multiple 1-health minions, and with this card being in the meta of Arena and having pretty sizable occurrence bonus, I imagine, that situation will be marginalized, and that's a really good thing for Arena. I think this card will improve class diversity a little bit. And we have Dirty Rat. So 2 mana, 2/6 Taunt, Battlecry, your opponent summons a random minion from their hand. Now, I couldn't get confirmation, but it does seem like the way this would work is your opponent, one card from their hand just goes into play, and the on-play effects of the Battlecries are not triggered. There's some chance that it makes a copy because the operative word for actually moving cards from someone's hand or deck is put, and put is not used there. But again, that's an unpopular opinion. I'm just saying it's possible. It's possible this card be completely worthless. But most likely, it's as it is likely to suggest that it would just put a card from their hand into play. That makes it pretty worthless in Arena, because in Arena people actually play big minions, and if you put one in play in the early game that instantly kills this, you'd probably just instantly lose the game. And yeah, that's pretty bad. It's a really high-risk card for Arena. For constructed in a more controlled environment, I think it's pretty solid. I do think Warrior is going to play this card. It's going to be a good tech choice to win fatigue battles. It's going to be a decent play to just remove more cards when preparing a brawl. It's going to be a decent play against very aggressive decks. So I do see it being played in Control Warrior. Now, I don't know what other decks to imagine that would be likely to survive the meta shift that we can expect with Priests, so I can't really speculate past that, but it should work out in probably a few other decks as well, I would hope. We have Dispatch Kodo, 4 mana, 2/4 Beast, Battlecry, deal damage equal to this minion's attack. So in the worst case, it's a 4 mana, 2/4 that deals 2 damage to something when you play it. And it's a Beast. So is that good? Yeah, that's really good. If you guys remember, maybe you don't, maybe you're a really new player, Keeper of the Grove basically did that, and it was used in every single druid deck. Now, yes, of course, you had the option of silence as well, but my point is, this is also a beast. That's important. It can do a lot more damage if you have hand buffers, right? And yeah, that card was nerfed and still sees some play today. So this card is just really solid. Really, really solid hunter card. And we have Backroom Bouncer, 4 mana, 4/4, and when a friendly minion dies, gain +1 attack. Pretty weak stuff. Really nothing to talk about. You're going to get like 1 or 2 buffs. Not really going to see any play. Just even for arena, it's going to be marginal. Smuggler's Run, give all minions in your hand +1/+1. Now this compared to the minion that's 2 mana for a 1/1, I think it's similar. I think I'd prefer the minion over this, so if the minion works out, maybe you'd play this. It's a nice turn 1 play, really. Like, if you could do this and then drop double buffed 1-drops, that'd be really powerful. So yeah, sure, could be good. We have Doppel Doppelganger, 5 mana, 2/2, and the battlecry summons 2 copies of this card. So at worst, it's 5 mana for 3 2/2s. That's really good. It has excellent synergy with Evolve because you're going to get 3 6-drops for 6 mana. They're going to be random, so that's a problem. But if you have anything that buffs this guy while it's in your hand, it should be pretty outrageous. Now, the downside is when you play a card like this, particularly when it's buffed, you're going to trigger your opponent's board clears. But if you're playing just like one card to trigger your opponent's board clear, which you can't have too many of, that's a pretty good situation there. So it seems like an overall high power level card, so much so that I think we will see the card a few times in constructed decks. Grime Street Protector, 7 mana taunt, battlecry, give adjacent minions Divine Shield. Now, with a body that big, it's obviously an insanely powerful card. So just on that, I think it'll see some play. But it's tough to make a deck that would consistently have that situation. So if you have 2 minions on the board that survive from the previous turn, you're probably playing a deck with smaller minions. So you're kind of playing like a Curve Paladin. And Curve Paladin really needs like the slam dunk win condition. And I don't think this is good enough. So it's kind of difficult to gauge that. And, maybe it'll just fit into that deck that just buffs a lot of crap. Because, yeah, you get small things. Maybe you draw a lot of cards with different mechanics and give them Divine Shield. Lots and lots and lots of buffs. It's possible. Very, very high power level card. Then we have Grimy Gadget here, 4 mana, 4/3. At the end of your turn, give a random minion in your hand +2/+2. Again, super high power level card. You can even compare this to like regular Cthulhu cards. If this card was just, buff your Cthulhu or buff another Cthulhu card, it'd probably see play. So, yeah, just extremely high power level card. Probably see a lot of play and extremely relevant in arena because a 4 attack on 4 is good enough. And the tempo generated from the next play, the fact that it's a class common, you'll see so many of them, so much potential. And we have Thorium Knuckles. So it's a 4 mana 2/3 warrior weapon, and when your hero attacks, give a random minion in your hand +1/+1. This is pretty crappy, I think. Yeah, it's just like on turn 4, dealing 2 damage is no longer relevant. It's only a good card if you can buff the weapon by a lot, but then if you can do that and it's actually good, people will run weapon removal and destroy the core of your deck. So there's no way this will be broken, right? It might be decent enough to see some play a little bit, but even that I'm highly suspect of. Maybe it's okay in arena. And lastly, we had Rat Pack, 3 mana for a 2/2 beast. Summon a number of 1/1 rats equal to this minion attack on the death rattle. And the rats are beast, of course. So compared to a lot of cards in similar power level, we had the Haunted Creeper on 2 mana. This card is, I think, a little bit worse than that, but with much higher potential. And there are a lot of attack buffs. I'm sure even temporary attack buffs work with this card. There's things like Houndmaster they can use. Just this card should push hunters a really, really long way. And it does seem to fit in the existing hunter decks. So we'll probably see a lot more mid-range hunter. It's a deck that did challenge Priest reasonably well in the past, and it seems like it's gotten a lot of tools since then. So we'll see if that's the deck to beat, but so far this week we've largely seen Warrior, Hunter, and Paladin cards. So we're yet to see what's coming up in the other classes, but so far it's looking like Hunter and Priest are going to be pretty damn dominant in the constructed scene. Let me know what you guys think. Hope you guys have enjoyed my review, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.